Hello, everyone. I hope you're all having a good day. I'm excited to be talking to you, though this is a little bit weird because I'm pre-recording this in my flat up in Glasgow, so I can't see any of you all, and I'm just trying to imagine an audience of lovely smiling faces whilst I do this. My name's Miranda, and I'm going to talk to you today about pollinator recording in the Channel Islands. I'm going to talk a little bit about the research that I do, and then a bit about citizen science and how you can get involved. To start, let me properly introduce myself. So I am a pollination ecologist, which means that you can often find me, as in this photo, crouched down, looking at some plant or insect that I found. I grew up in Guernsey, and that was really where I sort of fostered a love for nature. I spent a lot of time in rock pools as a kid and walking along the cliff paths, and just really enjoyed looking around me and trying to understand and discover what all of the different things were. When I was an undergraduate at university, I read this book, A Sting in the Tail by Dave Goulson. Dave is the founder of the Bumblebee Conservation Trust, and he's one of the UK's leading experts in bumblebees. And this is a lovely book all about bumblebees, and I really recommend it if you're interested in finding out a little bit more. It's very accessible and it's beautifully written. And it really inspired me because from reading this, I decided that bees and other pollinators was the thing that I wanted to study as a career. So I did a PhD in plant pollinator network ecology. This is all about trying to understand the interactions between insects and the plants that they feed on and in turn pollinate. Nowadays, I do a mix of a few different things, but I work for the University of Bristol and the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, and I'm very involved in the Pollinator project on Guernsey and Jersey. I mainly focus on pollinator research and citizen science, which I'm going to talk to you a bit about later. But I also get involved in conservation and policy, and I really enjoy community engagement doing events like this. So we're going to start off with a bit of a basic biology lesson. You might already know this, but I just want to make sure that everybody's on the same page. So when we talk about pollination and pollinators, we're all thinking of the same thing. So I have here a drawing of a sort of quite simple flower. And on it, you can see the male part of the flower, the stamen, which has the pollen, the little yellow dots, that yellow dust that you see. And then in the center of the flower, we have the female part, the stigma. Pollination is the process by which the pollen is transferred from the male part, the stamen, onto the female part, leading to fertilization. And this allows the plant to then produce seeds or fruits. And it basically then means that the next generation of plants can grow. Now, a lot of plants can self-pollinate, which means that the pollen from their own anthers can transfer onto the female part, and that will work. That is good. That will allow seeds to be produced. But what's often better than self-pollination is cross-pollination. So this is where the pollen from one flower is transferred to another flower of the same species. And the reason that this is better is because it increases genetic diversity. And for the long-term survival of plant species, genetic diversity is really important because it enables plants to adapt and to evolve. Now, in order for this pollination, cross-pollination to occur, it needs to be somehow transferred, and this can be done via the wind, sometimes by water, but a lot of the time it's facilitated by animals. If you have a look at some numbers, roughly 87% of flowering plant species around the world are in some way animal pollinated. Now, if you look at the graph here, you've got the latitude along the bottom and then that proportion of plant species animal pollinated. You can see that as you near the equator, this is leading towards almost 100% requiring or helped by animal pollination. So it's a very high proportion of plants, and this is important not just for the plants that make up our ecosystems that support biodiversity and basically enable the survival of all the other species, but from a very human perspective, it's because the food we eat, we need pollinators in order to have that. Now, this is a quote from Professor Jeff Ollerton. He's written a fantastic book, Pollinators and Pollination, which is a bit more sciencey. If you wanted to delve a bit deeper into this subject, I would recommend this book. And at the beginning, he says, it's easy to underestimate and impossible to exaggerate the importance of pollinators and the pollination services that they provide. And really, I don't think it could be put any better. So I just want to emphasize that it is so important that we have these pollinating animals, mainly insects, to pollinate plants, providing food and also stabilizing ecosystems for us. To have a little bit of a breakdown of pollinators, you can see here that we've got lots of different types of pollinators. The little slice up at the top, birds, mammals, and other animals, so that could be things like lizards, make up a very small proportion, only 2%. All of the rest are insects. Now, you might be surprised to see actually the diversity of this, because a lot of people don't really realize that flies are important pollinators. And bees always kind of end up in the spotlight of pollination, but actually you can see here that butterflies and moths and beetles are also really important for this process. This is just to illustrate some of the amazing diversity of pollinators that we have locally. So all of these photos were taken in the Channel Islands of our local pollinators. So you can see here we've got different types of bumblebees, we've got butterflies, day-flying moths, solitary bees, and some flies there as well. And they're all incredibly beautiful insects. Now, the problem is that insects are declining. A recent review paper suggested that insects are declining about 2.5% per year globally, and about 41% of species are threatened. And these are quite concerning numbers. They said in the paper, we are witnessing the largest extinction event on Earth since the Permian epoch. And this dinosaur here telling us this would know all about it, because this was when the dinosaurs became extinct. Now, it's not all doom and gloom, because where we have knowledge, where we understand what's going on and how we can help, we can take action. And if we have positive action, and that might be at a very local community scale on our island, in our own homes and gardens, or it might be at a much higher level, asking the government to make changes, we can have recovery, and we can help those insects to come back to a stable situation where they're no longer in decline and where they are providing those pollination services that are so important. And this is where recording comes in, because through recording pollinators, we increase our knowledge, we understand where they are, what they need in order to survive. And from that, we can take action, meaningful action that's going to make a difference. And then as we continue to record them, we can actually understand how that action has made a difference and continue to improve. So I'm going to talk to you about two different areas of recording pollinators. The first is the traditional sort of scientific research, which is what I do. And then I'll talk to you a little bit about citizen science, which is where you can get involved. I've been involved in pollinator research on the Channel Islands for about 3 years. This is through the University of Bristol and the Pollinator Project. And one of the key things that we're doing at the moment is trying to build up a baseline understanding of what pollinators there are on the island. So we have these things called malaise traps, sort of tent-like structure, which we've put out at different sites on Guernsey, Jersey, Alderney, and Sark. And we put this out for a period of time in the summer, and it captures a small subsection of insects that are in the area. From this, we can begin to understand what insects are there, what kind of numbers are they in, and as we continue to do this through time, we can begin to monitor change, understand, are they currently declining? And if we can help them, what does that look like? How much of a difference can we make? A second aspect of the research, which I'm really excited about because we're going to be introducing this summer for the first time, is at those sites where we have the Malaise traps, is we're going to do a little bit of bat recording. And the reason we want to do this is because bats eat insects. So this is now looking at the next level on the food chain. Okay, if the pollinator population is healthy and there's enough insects around, then that should mean that there's lots of food for bats. So that should support a healthy bat population. So here we're focusing not just on the pollinators, but thinking about the wider food web structure and the wider biodiversity, because all of these things are connected. A third part of what we're doing, and I'm quite excited about this, is looking at DNA analysis of bumblebees. So we're catching bumblebees in the field. We take a small DNA sample from them, which this isn't lethal. The bumblebees are then released and off they go to live the rest of their lives. We take this DNA sample and we do a DNA analysis on it. And this is going to tell us the number of colonies on the island, and it will tell us about the survival rate. So we will know how many of those colonies are surviving year on year. And that's going to help us to understand what kind of conditions it is that they need, and what we can do to help them. The second part of pollinator monitoring is citizen science. Now, if you're not familiar with citizen science, the term, it's the volunteer engagement of the general public in the scientific process. And this can be through various different methods. So it could be the design of projects, it could be the analysis of results, but a lot of the time it's through data collection. Citizen science isn't confined to just one particular area of science. It can be used in all different disciplines. But we're interested in pollinator citizen science, and that means recording insects and the plants that they visit. Why do citizen science? Why bother with this when you've got the research, the people like me doing this as our jobs? Well, the reason is that it's sort of threefold. Citizen science builds nature connection for the people who are doing it, so you. And when I say nature connection, this is a well-studied phenomena in psychology, and it's all about using your senses to create emotion, meaning, compassion, and recognizing beauty in the natural world. And we know from studies that through doing this, through building your nature connection, it gives people a sense of well-being and purpose. It has really positive mental health impacts. It also has positive impacts for nature, because we know that people who engage in citizen science and build their nature connection tend to have more pro-nature behaviours. So they're less likely to litter, for example. And this is also really good for science because it enables us to collect data, and particularly data from undersampled areas where we either can't get to them, we just don't have the time or the resources to do it. So ways that you can get involved in citizen science. A first step at a very basic level is to submit casual records. So whilst you're out and about in your garden, on a walk, just sitting having a cup of tea even, you might notice insects and plants around you. And when you notice them, you can record them. So you can send your records of the things that you've seen to the Jersey Biodiversity Centre. If you go on their website, you can upload them as a simple form. And tell us what you're seeing. And that really helps because it's helped us to build this data set of everything that's there on the islands. You can also map your pollinator patch. So if you have an area in your garden that you've sown, particularly for pollinators, you can map that there. And then we can get an idea of what are the habitats that are available to pollinators. Now, if you feel that you can't identify plants or you don't really know what the different insects are, you don't need to worry. There is a fantastic app called Seek, which I really recommend. Seek is part of iNaturalist, which is the big kind of biodiversity recording scheme in the UK. And you download it onto your phone, and it's amazing. You can literally just point your phone camera at something that you've seen, an insect, a plant, or other animals as well, and it will tell you what it is. Now, it doesn't always work exactly perfectly, but it's very good. Okay, and a lot of the time it can get it down to species level. And if it can't get it to species level, it'll just tell you a higher description of what it thinks it is. And you could then go and look it up and try and find out more. So if you have no identification skills and you want to try and build them, Seek is a really good place to start. If you want to get a little bit more involved, you can do a fit count. And Danny is going to talk to you next about this, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. But just to tell you that fit counts are part of the UK Pollinator Monitoring Scheme, POMS. So this is a big national scheme, and this scheme is also, we're looking to roll this out across Europe so that we can collect this same data for all different countries. What it involves is putting out a square in your garden, say, or out in the park, and then focusing on a particular flower in that square, counting all the insects that visit for 10 minutes. Now, you don't, again, need to be able to identify things right down to species level. You can just identify them to the groups, and Denny is going to explain that all to you next. And this is a really lovely activity. It's just so nice to sit and watch the insects. And you'll be surprised, I think, what you observe and learn from doing this. If you want to get a little bit more involved in identification of our local species, then the Guernsey Pollinator Project has put together some helpful guides. So we have our 6 Guernsey bumblebees, 20 common solitary bees that you find, and 19 butterflies. Now, these all say Guernsey on them, but they are absolutely relevant to Jersey as well and the other islands. So if you want these, if you go to the pollinatorproject.gg website, so that's the Guernsey Pollinator Project website, go to the section called Educate, and you can download the ID guides there. So I just want to finish up by saying thank you so much to all the amazing people that I work with. There are so many organisations and individuals who get involved with what we're doing, often voluntary in their own time, and it really does make a difference. And it's so wonderful to be able to work with people who are so enthusiastic and want to work together. So I'll just leave you with this final slide. My email address is here, and if you're on Twitter, you can find me at Miranda Bane. I sadly can't answer your questions live because I'm not actually there, but if you wanted to email me or tweet me a question, I'll be happy to answer, or you can speak to one of the organisers here today and they will relay that on to me and I'll get in touch. So thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoy the rest of this event, and happy recording.